I bought the shortwave radio on a Saturday afternoon at a yard sale, 3 streets over from my apartment building. I wasn't even supposed to be there. I'd been walking back from the grocery store when I saw the faded cardboard sign and figured I'd kill a few minutes browsing through old junk. The radio was sitting on a rickety folding table between a box of VHS tapes and a stack of dog-eared paperbacks. It looked heavy, metal, and built like something from the Cold War era. The guy running the sale, a frail man with yellow teeth and a lazy eye, told me it still worked most of the time, and only asked $10 for it. I bought it without thinking. Not because I needed a shortwave radio, but because it had this strange, almost magnetic pull. Something about the way it looked made me want to take it home. When I got back to my apartment, I set the groceries on the counter and went straight to the radio. It had no brand name, just a plate with a serial number that had been scratched almost completely away. The dials clicked with a satisfying resistance, and when I plugged it in, the speakers hummed to life with a low, constant static. I turned the dial slowly, scanning through the spectrum. Bursts of distorted voices, distant foreign stations, random beeps and tones, the usual weird shortwave stuff. I was halfway through the range when I froze. In between 2 frequencies, buried under the hiss, I heard it. Someone saying my name. Clear enough that I wasn't mistaking it for random noise. Ethan! Just like that. Calm, almost conversational. My stomach knotted, but I told myself it had to be a coincidence. Maybe a random word from some far-off broadcast just happened to sound like my name. But then it happened again. Ethan. This time a little sharper. I leaned closer, my ear almost against the speaker. I could hear faint breathing under the static. It felt wrong, too intimate, like whoever it was knew exactly who they were talking to. I twisted the dial back and forth, trying to lock onto the source, but every time I moved it even a fraction, the voice vanished. I had to hold it on that precise in-between spot to hear it. Ethan, you can hear me. The voice was male, deep, but not aggressive. If anything, it sounded pleased. I didn't respond. I didn't even think to speak. My mind was still trying to rationalize what I was hearing. Then, it said something that made my skin crawl. I see you. The tiny hairs on my neck stood up. I glanced around my apartment like an idiot, knowing damn well no one was there. I told myself it was just a prank. Maybe some weird ham radio operator messing with people for fun. But before I could turn it off, the voice chuckled. No, not yet. Don't turn it off. My hands froze over the dial. It was the "not yet" that made my stomach turn. How the hell could he know what I was about to do? I shut the radio off anyway, yanked the plug from the wall, and shoved it onto the top shelf of my closet. The silence felt heavy, but I convinced myself it was over. That night, though, I woke up at 3:17 a.m. to a faint hiss coming from the living room. I stumbled out in the dark, and my heart dropped when I saw it. The radio was on, the dials glowing faintly, static filling the air. I hadn't plugged it back in. I didn't touch the radio for 2 days after that night, but the voice didn't care. It came through the walls like the air in the room was carrying it the faint hiss of static in my ears. Even when I was sitting in the living room without the thing plugged in, I thought I was losing it. I checked for tinnitus, I checked for hidden speakers, but the sound didn't stop. And every so often in the whispering, I'd hear my name stretched out in that same slow, low tone that didn't sound like a man or a woman, just something speaking through me. Instead of to me, I started sleeping with the TV on just for some normal sound. But that's when it escalated. The voice began to tell me things. Little things at first, like you left the stove on, or your phone is in the couch. And it was right every time. At first I told myself, maybe it was coincidence. Maybe I had subconsciously noticed those things, but then it started telling me things I couldn't possibly know. It told me the exact time my upstairs neighbor's dog would start barking. It told me what song would play next on the radio in my car, and it told me that someone was going to knock at my door at exactly 3:17 a.m. on Tuesday. And I laughed to myself. But when 3:17 hit the knock, came 3 slow taps that echoed through the empty apartment. I didn't answer. I sat frozen on my couch, clutching a kitchen knife like some pathetic horror movie cliche. But when I looked through the peephole, there was nothing, just the hallway. But I could still hear the faint buzz of the voice, like it was standing right outside the door, breathing against the wood. The next morning, I packed the radio in a box and shoved it in the closet. But that didn't help. By Wednesday, it was louder. Like it was inside my head instead of through a speaker, and it was angry. I could feel it in the tone. No words, just a low pressure behind my eyes. Like being underwater too long. I didn't go to work, I didn't eat. I just sat there, listening to the hiss, feeling like it was sizing me up. Then Thursday, it said something that made me go cold. "You don't have to keep living like this," it whispered, and my stomach dropped because it didn't sound like it was offering a solution. It sounded like it was giving me an order. I unplugged everything in my apartment, the TV, the lamps. I pulled the breaker switch, but the hiss didn't stop. And when I screamed for it to leave me alone, it just laughed a sound like glass scraping metal. And it said, "Almost time." That night I had a dream. Or maybe it wasn't a dream, where I was sitting in a chair in a completely dark room with that radio in front of me, the dial spinning by itself, the needle jumping wildly, but the static wasn't random anymore. It was breathing slow, calm, breathing that wasn't mine. I couldn't move my hands, I couldn't look away. And then, out of the static, a sentence formed, "Open the door tomorrow at midnight." And I woke up with my heart hammering and my hands shaking and a dull pain in my ears. Like I'd been listening to something too loud for too long, but I live alone and I had no idea what would happen if I listened or what would happen if I didn't. I didn't sleep the night after the voice told me it was coming through. I sat in my living room with the radio in front of me, the dial frozen exactly where it had been when it last spoke. I didn't dare turn it on, but I also couldn't put it away. The static had stopped after the last words, and now the room felt heavier. Like the silence wasn't empty, but was instead a pause between breaths. Every shadow in my apartment seemed to bend toward the radio. When the morning came, I tried convincing myself it had just been some bizarre coincidence. Maybe a prank transmission from some ham operator, but I couldn't shake the way it said my name. Not just like it knew me, but like it was savoring me. By late afternoon, I broke down and decided to take it outside. I wrapped the thing in 2 garbage bags, tied them tight, and carried it to the dumpster behind my building. I didn't even throw it in gently. I hurled it so it slammed against the metal with a hollow clang, the sound echoing down the alley. For the first time in days, I felt relief. I went back inside, showered, and started making dinner. Halfway through chopping onions, I heard the faint hiss. My blood went cold before my brain could even process it. I knew that sound. I dropped the knife, ran into the living room, and there it was, the radio, sitting exactly where it had been before I took it out, still wrapped in the same 2 garbage bags, not even torn. The hiss of static was soft, pulsing, almost like it was breathing. I didn't move closer. I didn't touch it. I backed away slowly and locked myself in the bedroom. I stayed there for hours, sitting on the floor with my back against the door. Eventually, the static faded again, and I thought maybe it was safe to leave. But when I opened the door, the radio was now in the middle of the hallway, the bags gone. The dial was glowing faintly, though I swear I'd never seen it light up before. I don't remember deciding to, but my hand reached out and turned the knob just slightly. The voice was there instantly, crystal clear, like it was right next to my ear. It said, "Stop trying to throw me away, I'm almost there." My knees nearly buckled. I asked it what it wanted, my voice shaking. The static swelled, and then it said, "You?" I turned and bolted. I left the apartment, didn't even grab my keys, didn't lock the door. I ran into the street and didn't stop until I was 3 blocks away. I booked a motel room that night. I couldn't sleep, but at least I was away from it. The next morning, I went back with a friend so I wouldn't be alone. We opened the door and the apartment was silent. The radio was gone. I thought maybe it had just left, if that's even possible. But then my friend asked why I'd left my TV on. I don't have a TV. I walked into the living room, and sitting where the TV would be if I owned one was the radio. Except it wasn't just playing static anymore. It was showing a snowy black and white screen. The voice came through, distorted but still somehow intimate. I found another way in. That was 3 days ago. I'm in another motel now, far from home. I've thrown away everything that could pick up a signal. My phone, my laptop, even the motel's clock radio. But last night, the room's landline rang. When I picked it up, there was no sound, just a faint hiss, followed by my name.
If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe for more horror tales.